So, a few words on the latest situation in Hong Kong. Some 2 million people were on the streets today. Now, consider Hong Kong has a population of about 7.5 million people. So, we're talking of almost a third of the entire territory was on the streets protesting. Such is the depth of feeling in this. That would be the equivalent of about 100 million Americans or about 20 million Britons protesting on the streets. That's the level of feeling there is in Hong Kong over this extradition bill. Now, I was following the CNN reporting this earlier online. The vast majority of comments are from Hong Kongers, um, citing their experience on the ground, the things they're saying. A few CCP stooges getting through the woodwork and making excuses for it. And I got into a bit of an exchange with one guy. He was actually from Taiwan, but whether he was a communist living there, I don't know. But he said the actual extradition bill was about a specific case regarding a rapist being extradited to Taiwan, a rapist who'd murdered his girlfriend. Now that's an awful crime, and I think most people would agree such a person should face justice. But here's the problem: this isn't just about the extradition bill. And even if that specific case was to Taiwan, what it would allow is extradition to the mainland. Now, what is Chinese justice? A British businessman, Peter Humphrey, was drugged, put in a small cell, and forced to sign a confession. A forced confession. This is Chinese justice. It is rotten to the core. There is absolutely no due process in the Chinese justice system. So that is why Hong Kongers are so angry and concerned about this. Say, for instance, you got someone who is accused of subversion or writing inflammatory comments about Mao Zedong, and the Chinese regime wanted to extradite them. Carrie Lam and her government have shown themselves to be puppets of the CCP. So they would be extradited into some re education camp on the mainland. That is what could happen. So, as someone put it, what would one murder be compared to a potential massacre? I don't know where this is going to go. As it stands, Carrie Lam has somewhat backed down. She said she's going to try and get a cross party consensus on this, and she's made a grovelling apology. It's kind of a half apology, like she should have been more listened to the people a bit more, something along those lines. This is after a tearful breakdown she had the other day. My sympathies with her are somewhat limited. This is a woman who has allowed herself to be a pawn for one of the world's most grotesque regimes. Um, and she hasn't really listened to the people of Hong Kong. So my sympathies with her are limited. There's very real anger on the streets. And I don't condone violence or anything like that, but this is literally about human freedom. This isn't a protest over one specific issue, although the extradition bill is the catalyst for this particular protest. This is about something deeper, which is a gradual erosion of Hong Kong. In fact, the logo that's been going around has been the little Hong Kong lotus flower rotting, dying Hong Kong. That is how people feel. That's why all the protesters, or a lot of the protesters, have been wearing black. Um, the more I think about this, the more I think it is absolutely pivotal that our next Prime Minister shows that he will stand up to China. For too damn long, I think we have kowtowed to Beijing. Too long. Whatever protests we have made regarding human rights, it's been muted, it's been behind closed doors. We need to be vocal. I think, frankly, it's got to a point where we have enough justification to summon the Chinese ambassador, not just over what's happening in Hong Kong and their breaking of the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration, but a whole range of other issues. The mass incarceration of millions of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, the ongoing suppression on the mainland. But even if we have a cold-headed approach to this and leave aside the human rights issues, China has been playing undermining techniques of Western democracy for a long time, trying to stoke up the Chinese diaspora. Um, through such things as so-called Confucius Institutes. The treatment of Peter Humphreys. I feel we should have raised a lot more noise about things like that. Why are we not doing it? I mean, I'm almost as angry with the British government for its weakness when it comes to China. A good friend of mine, well, a friend of mine is, uh, sorry, lost my trail of thought there. I'm really bothered by this. What I would say is we need to speak out. We really, really need to be assertive about what is going on here. China is a more powerful country than Britain today. It's a bigger country in terms of its economy, in terms of its military. But that doesn't mean that we can be pushed around. I think if we join the Canadians, the Australians, and the New Zealanders, and yes, the Americans, to stand up to Beijing, send out a message that they can't behave this way. Indeed, let's join the French as well. Let's join every Western democracy that has experienced China's underhand tactics, because most have. There needs to be a united voice because the only language a bully understands is force. Let me make one thing absolutely clear. China today is not a victim. This is not the 19th century. China is not a victim. So for the communist regime to wallow in this century of humiliation logic that, oh, we were humiliated 150 years ago, so it's okay for us to throw our weight around now, um, to erode due process, to trample human rights, to break treaties, this is unacceptable. And I want the next Prime Minister, whether it's Johnson, whether it's Hunt, whether it's Raab or Javid, I think it'll be one of those four men. They need to show backbone and stand up to Beijing. I know we cannot totally cut off all ties. Even at the height of the Cold War, there were ties between the United States and the Soviet Union. So I know that's not going to happen. But we need to show that we're not afraid to speak out against Beijing. And we need to disregard their hurt feelings and other phony excuses that they use. We need to say we're not playing this game anymore. We're not going to be in this situation where we're pushed around and you think that you can make us feel guilty. I really feel strongly about it. Meng Hongwei, the daughter of the Huawei CEO, she is treated far better in Canada than those three Canadians are treated in China. That shows you what you need to know about Western justice versus Chinese justice. Western transparency versus Chinese dishonesty. And by Chinese, I'm talking specifically about the communist regime. I'm not anti China. I know many, many Chinese who hate the regime, but they can't freely speak out. And many of those who defend it, they don't know any better. They've been indoctrinated this way literally since they were toddlers. So that's what we're up against. Arrogant Emperor Xi and his vile regime need to know that they cannot just keep doing this, throwing their weight around without being challenged, disregarding normal international conventions on what is acceptable. So I feel very strongly about this. I back the Hong Kongers 110%. And as for cases where there are serious crimes like murder, like rape, you know, I'm conservative on crime. Those people need to face justice. But the problem is those sort of cases cannot be used to cover something bigger, which would be the extradition of all suspects. That includes dissidents, such as the Hong Kong bookseller who disappeared. That is the issue here. In fact, Hong Kong booksellers, there's more than one. So we need to see what's going on. Hong Kong is a pivotal issue right now, but it is more than Hong Kong. I don't know what is going to happen in the near future regarding China, but frankly, I think it's high time that Western democracies stood up to China and said, we know what you're doing, and we're not going to tolerate it any longer. This is a regime that lies about a massacre in which they murdered their own people. I mean, if the communist regime is innocent regarding Tiananmen Square, why, why, why do they not let people talk about it? Can any communist explain that? I am not anti China, but I freely admit I despise the vile, grotesque ghastly regime that runs China. Whatever economic success there has been, you can quote millions have been lifted out of poverty, and there's a consumer society now. Is that worth it if basic liberty isn't there? We need to stand up to Beijing. And I'm sick and tired of British politicians tiptoeing around this subject. They need to start showing backbone and stand up to these thugs in Beijing.